Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Before I begin this video and you'd like to use OCD Recovery's coaching services, please reach out to phil@ocdrecovery.com and he will get back to you as quick as he can. So yeah, today guys, I just wanted to speak, let's just get this light out of the way, in the background, there we go. I just wanted to speak a little bit about my journey with chronic anxiety and what that journey looked like for me, what I went through, and yeah, where I'm at now, and what was required to recover from chronic anxiety. Because, you know, in the OCD recovery journey, chronic anxiety makes up a large part of the suffering, right? There's a huge element of fear, fear of not going back to how you were before OCD set in, fear of never returning to that baseline level of calmness that we all crave. And yeah, so the chronic anxiety can come from the core OCD themes or fears, right? So in my case, I had HOCD for a number of years. You know, my nervous system was very sensitized and had been for a long period of time. And the chronic anxiety was a byproduct of that HOCD, right? And I found that for me, even after the HOCD went away for me, I cut out the compulsions. I wasn't, asking for reassurance or doing avoidance behaviours or double checking myself. Even after I stopped all of that, I was still left with this chronic anxiety that lingered for a few years, actually. Around 2.5 to 3 years, I was still left with this fear of fear cycle. What if I stay stuck forever? What if I don't recover? Am I doing it right? Am I compulsively trying to do exposures to try and desensitize myself to the anxiety, when in reality I just need to try and wear it and not try and be rid? So there was all of that going on, and I had chronic anxiety for a while, and I had all of the symptoms that you can think of. I had nausea, heart palpitations, which I was hospitalized for, just due to the concern and the frequency of them, just caused by the anxiety mainly. Panic attacks, acid reflux, brain fog, unable to concentrate. I remember, there'd be times when I'd just be like tapping my leg constantly on the ground. It's like a response to anxiety. A dry skin around my face, insomnia, not able to sleep. All of those things I had going on. And when fear and anxiety is blitzing 24/7 from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, it's very, very difficult. It's very tough, and the only thing that you're dreaming about or thinking of is how am I possibly going to get out of this? How can I possibly bring an end to this suffering or to this misery that I'm going through? And Rob's touched on this before. Even in our worst moments, someone with chronic OCD in their worst moments would probably trade, their arm or leg if it meant having baseline level of peace and calmness. So they are very intense, and it's like that bullet machine gun like intensity. And for me, it felt like I was on a plane. With every trigger that came in, it felt like I was on a plane crash, it felt like I was on a plane that was about to crash. I was braced forward, readying myself for the absolute terror or the worst case scenario that was about to happen. And in that moment, it felt like I was on the edge of doom, that I was about to be pushed off a cliff. And it just felt that scary and that real. And that was just constantly on repeat, 24/7. And it was hard, very, very hard. It really meddled with my life, disrupted things, dating, work. I was very distracted at work. Like I said before, I couldn't sleep very well. And I was just disheveled. I was haggard, right? So these physical symptoms, you have to do the best you can not to add that additional layer of resistance when they do come, because that's what it feeds on. That's what chronic anxiety wants. It wants the resistance. We have to try and surrender, that internal surrender into the anxiety as best as we can. And that just takes time. That's not something you can do in a moment. It comes as you adopt unconditional self and life acceptance, looking at the shoulds and musts of why you shouldn't be anxious, looking at the catastrophizing of the anxiety itself. So there's a lot of that going on. And I remember for me, it'd wax and wane over a period of a few years. Some days it would be very, very intense, like, when it was a 10 out of 10. Some days, I remember one of my worst times with anxiety, I'd be holding my hand at a bar that I was in because the trigger was so strong, and it's literally taking it minute by minute in those circumstances. Other days, the symptoms aren't going to be as strong. It's going to wax and wane. It's going to be unpredictable. And we have to be aware of that, right? But when you're suffering with chronic anxiety, it's so important that you bring it with you for the ride, and that you continue to live your life regardless of how you feel. And I know that sounds so hard to hear, but there's no recovery without feeling discomfort. If you just stayed anxious, right, and you stayed stuck in your room, you're saying to yourself there that I can't live my life whilst I'm anxious. I can't live my life until I recover. And that subconsciously just puts another layer of resistance onto the anxiety, because it's self-reinforcing how bad the anxiety is, right? It's saying you can't live your life until the anxiety's gone away. And OCD and anxiety just thrives on resistance. That's the opposite of acceptance. That's resistance. That's just keeping the cycle fueled up. I can't recover until XYZ. It's like waiting for a feeling that's never going to be there. Like I say with my customers, it's like waiting for a train that's never going to arrive. There's never going to be a right moment where you can go through the discomfort. It's just repeatedly doing that day in, day out, whilst working on your beliefs, and also making sure that the compulsions and avoidance behaviours, reassurance behaviours are all brought down. So, like I touched on there, with anxiety, chronic anxiety, the problem is the urgency. Like, we urgently want to get out of this. We urgently want to change our situation. And that keeps it all fueled up, right? It's understandable that we want to get out of the situation that we're in. But the reality is, on the OCD recovery journey, it's going to be a few years of suffering. So we have to acknowledge that. And, refusing to acknowledge your anxiety just creates more resistance, and it just keeps the emotions and the sensations high. We have to come to terms with the fact that we have anxiety. We have to come to terms with the fact that we're going through something quite uncomfortable. It's valid because it exists with anxiety. There's no reason why we shouldn't be experiencing anxiety. There's a reason why we are experiencing it, and wishing and demanding for different is just not going to help us. We have to be aligned to where we are now. I never wanted to acknowledge that I had chronic anxiety. It was always, how can I get rid of this? How can I get myself out of this position? It was never acknowledging and saying, hey, you know what, Elliot, you have anxiety, and this is you. And whether it goes or not, it doesn't matter, because I'm still going to try and live my life regardless of how I feel. With anxiety, we have to drop the expectation of it going. We have to imagine somebody knocked on the door and said, Elliot, you've got anxiety for the rest of your life. There's nothing you could do. I think, that would actually be quite liberating. The resistance or the gasoline that you pour on the fire would come to an end. You'd come to terms with it. Sure, it'd take a little while to come to terms with it in the first instance, but, the pressure would be off. You could just allow it to be so, right? And that is very much what we're trying to do with anxiety. Imagine that it's just something that you have. Imagine somebody with diabetes. They have to inject insulin into them. They have to do that day in, day out. Imagine anxiety is something that you just have. It's just something that you have as a human being, and you have to adapt to it as best as you can, because what's getting rid of it going to do? It's just going to keep you stuck. It's just going to keep you embroiled in the cycle. So acceptance is coming to terms with something without the expectation of it changing. And obviously, it's not coming from the angle of, I'm going to accept my anxiety to make it go away. No, that's condition. That's conditional. That's accepting it on the condition that it goes away. It's not that at all. It's saying, I can accept myself and my life with anxiety, regardless of whether it goes away, and I'm still going to live my life. I'm still going to live my life with the anxiety there, because I can't wait for it to go away. Trying to get rid of it, where's that getting me? It's just keeping me stuck. So it's got to come the angle of making peace and coming to terms with the anxiety and living your life in that way, right? And it's very much taking it trigger by trigger, like I mentioned before. It's going to be random. It's going to catch you off guard. And it's going to be very intense. You can go from feeling okay to feeling really bad. And it really is taking it trigger by trigger. So when that initial trigger comes in, the anxiety comes in, bang, that's when it hits the hardest. Okay, in that initial moment when the anxiety comes in, that's when it's at its most intense. And in that moment, you have to absorb that and really sit with that discomfort without trying to fix and trying to solve it. You have to really weather that impact of it, right? And once that initial impact has gone, that is when the anxiety starts to lose its power. But it's about not engaging with that, and it takes practice. dealing with anxiety and sitting with anxiety takes a lot of practice, and it's like a skill that you develop over time. A lot of the recovery journey is sitting with the anxiety and doing your best not to add that secondary layer of resistance to it. So yeah, you allow it to be so, trigger by trigger, trigger by trigger, day by day, and it's a process that you rinse and repeat. So bang, the trigger comes in. It might be randomly, maybe it'll be an intrusive thought, maybe it'll be something in the environment, it might be a color, anything at all can be completely random. The trigger comes in, you feel that discomfort, you allow it to be so, and you get on with your day. And then, that will keep happening on repeat, and the trigger will come in and then it will leave you. Some moments it will hang around for a minute, maybe some just a few seconds. We don't actually know, we're not actually aware of when the anxiety leaves us. It's like when we fall asleep, we're not actually aware of the moment that we fall asleep. It's something that it just happens naturally, it just dissipates. Okay, so trigger by trigger, it might hang around for a little while, it might not, but it's so important just to try and carry on with your day as best as you can. And if you're distracted by the anxiety whilst you go about your day, that is absolutely fine, it's valid. To try and not be distracted by it is the problem. It's a problem if you're just staying in your room 24/7 and not doing anything and not living your life. If you're living your life, going to work, and you feel the anxiety and you feel a little bit distracted by it because of its intensity, then that is absolutely fine. We need to have the life structure good, because it's the beliefs and the behaviors, that combination, that's really going to help us with the anxiety. Okay, so this does come with experience, and it's going to feel very intense, very difficult sometimes. There's going to be lots of challenges. There's going to be lots of false dawns where you think that you've got that deeper level of acceptance, but then it's going to rear its head, and then you have to level up in the game, right? It's like a level up. With the acceptance, it comes off in layers of an onion. So you might find that you reach a certain level, and then you stay at that level for maybe a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, and then the next setback comes in and you think, fuck, I'm back to square one. What do I do? I'm embroiled in the cycle again. Why me? How do I get out of this? But it just shows you where your acceptance isn't quite as deep as it needs to be. So that is what it's all about, a deeper level of acceptance, really seeing yourself as, a human being who is capable of experiencing anxiety. There's no reason why you shouldn't experience anxiety. We're not exempt from suffering, unfortunately. Humans in life are not exempt from suffering, as nice as it would be. People without OCD suffer, people with broken legs and cancers and motor neurons disease all suffer as well. So seeing that why we're not above experiencing anxiety is really key. Bringing down the catastrophized emotions about the anxiety. Like, yes, it is uncomfortable, but I can still live my life even with anxiety there. I can still walk, I can still eat, I can still have the use of my legs. It could definitely be worse. Imagine I was stuck with chronic anxiety in an Auschwitz death camp. That would be far from ideal. That'd be far worse than just the anxiety on its own. So all of these things marry up to form the ingredients for anxiety recovery. And it will take as long as it takes. They might get to a point where you've done all the reading, you understand all the beliefs, you've read the books, you understand how to break down the irrational beliefs about the anxiety from back to front. You could do it in your sleep. I got to that point, I literally knew every last bit of information, every last bit of detail, but the anxiety wasn't budging because I was still trying to get rid of it too much. I was still doing it to make it go away. But that was when I had to take the foot off the gas and really live the journey, like really live my life with anxiety and say, hey, you know what, this is something that I have. It might not go away, but I can come to terms with it and live my life regardless. Because, where's resisting it going to get you? Where's not accepting your current situation getting you? When there is conflict in us, right, we're stepping out from what is reality to our imagination. So when the anxiety is there, it's very high. We imagine ourselves in this position where we're not anxious, where the reality is that we are. So that it just creates this big conflict. It makes the anxiety even more prominent. So yeah, you need to be aware of that. You need to see things of the way they are, be rational towards where you find yourself now in your current journey, striving for more. Recovery from chronic anxiety is possible. I did it without medication. Of course, you can use medication to take the edge off things, but speak to your doctor regarding that. It can definitely get you back to a baseline level of functioning, but if it was just down to medication alone, then the OCD recovery page would just say, yeah, take this medication. But it's different for everyone. They can help you as long as you're working on the beliefs and behaviors, reading the books. They're going to take at least a couple of reads each. I know that's quite hard to hear. A Last of Life by Paul David was a very good book for me due to the chronic anxiety. I actually read that book 3 times. Sometimes as well, I got a bit compulsive. You know, when I really wanted the anxiety to go away, I would like go up into my room when I'm feeling triggered and get the book out and try and absorb that next piece of information, that next golden nugget of information. And of course, doing that in the moment was just compulsive. You know, it's reinforcing the fact that I was scared of not recovering. It was reinforcing the fact that I was scared of being anxious. So, you know, those urges to want to do those compulsions and alleviate the discomfort in any way, you need to try and refrain from that and just live your life regardless. Yeah, of course, working on the books and doing the reading, you know, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or however you want to do it. But, you know, it comes to a point where we try too hard, you know, where we get desperate and we just want that anxiety gone so badly that we actually become counterproductive in our recovery. You know, a lot of this is just letting the nerves settle. Yes, working on the beliefs, but like I said, 90 to 95% of recovery from chronic anxiety is just bringing it with you everywhere you go. Not trying to change it, not trying to fix, not trying to solve, because that's the opposite of acceptance. Bringing it with you for the ride and trying to live your life in the best way that you can. Okay, so I think that's all for this video. If you've got any questions about chronic anxiety or your current journey, comment down below and I'd love to get back to you. Thanks guys, and I'll see you on the next video.